is Tech Tricks and Fundamentals, and as the title suggests, today we'll be learning about program looping. So in programming, there are many instances in which we have to repeat code multiple times. For example, we might need to do 2 to the power of 100. Then we would have to write x times 2 100 times. To solve this, there is program looping. You can use different types of loops based on what operation you would like to perform. Mainly, there are 4 types of loops used in programming: the for loop, while loop, do while loop, and the if loop. But for the purposes of today's lesson, we will only focus on the first 3. The if loop will be covered in the next video. Before we get into loops, we must know the symbols to code and compare. So here are all the operators. This is the double equal to operator, which means equal to. So for example, if you want to compare 5 is equal to 5, then you would do 5 double equal to 5. This is not equal to with an exclamation mark and an equal sign. It just compares. If you want to say if y is not equal to 0, then you would write this. This is a less than operator, which we're familiar with. So 3 is less than 5. This is less than equal to. So 3 is less than equal to 3. So it's less than or equal to. So 3 can be less than 3 or 3 can be equal to 3, which is true. Greater than operator, 234 is greater than 11. And greater than or equal to operator, 22 is equal greater than or equal to 21. So 22 is not equal to 21, but 22 is greater than 22. So when coding, we also want to be able to take the user input. This can be done by using the printf and the scanf function demonstrated. Over here, what we do is we do the printf and then we tell the user what to enter. So for example, if you're asking the user for his name, then you would say printf and then what is your name? Or it could be anything. This is just what you prompt the user. And then after that, the function that actually takes in input from the user is scanf, which is the format. And then you use the type specifier since we're taking in their name, which is a string. So use %s, and then you add it to user input. So this is the addition sign. So this basically tells us to append whatever we get here, send that to the user input. So let's take an example for that. Okay, so let's just run to see if it works. Okay, so this tells us that error, expected identifier or this before the equal to token, before we tell it this. So over here, what we did is we just put float is equal to favorite num, which is you can't really assign a variable to a float. So what we should have done here correctly is like this. Run that and then you enter 7.2. Okay, yep, so we see it works. So now let's explain. So over here, this is our include statement. So we include the standard input output header file. Then we go into our main function. Over here, we define a variable where we're gonna send our input. And then we print f, we tell the user to enter their favorite number. And then using this line, we scan the input. So we do scanf, and then this is %f for a float, because over here we designated it to a float. And then this just tells it to send it to the variable favorite under num. And then after that, we print out your favorite number is, and then the %f serves as a placeholder. And then inside %f, we fill in the variable favorite under number. And then we return 0. The next loop we'll be discussing is the for loop. So the for loop is basically used to perform actions over and over and over again. So this is the syntax. So over here we have the formatting the loop, which is for, and then the parentheses. Inside first we put in the initial value, then we put in the final value, and then we put in the step. So over here we have I is equal to 0, I less than 5, and the step is I is equal to I plus 1. And then over here we put in the loop body, whatever what we want to do. So let's just say we want to do x plus 1, right? So over here I is equal to 1. So then it'll run the first time, then I will become 2. Over here I is equal to 0, sorry. And then over here we will run it once, and then it'll change. It'll go through all this, and then once it reaches the end, I will become 1 because 0 plus 1 is 1. Then we run it again, I becomes 2. Then we run it again, I becomes 3. We run it again, I becomes 4. And then over here, I is equal to 4, I is less than 5, it runs again, I becomes 5. But over here, I is not less than 5. This is why we learned the conditional operators. So then the for loop will exit, and then it will go on to whatever's next. So let's take an example of this. So now let's see if it runs. Okay, yeah, it runs. So over here, what we do is we're basically include the file header, we set the function, and then we set integer x is equal to 1, and then we run a for loop where we set integer I is equal to 0. So over here we just want to run I as the condition. So over here what we do is integer I is equal to 0 because the computer doesn't know what I is. So when you just do I is equal to 0 and you run it, I isn't declared, it says. So what you can do is you can either do integer I is equal to 0 and then run it, because over here for this scope the program knows that I is an integer. Or what you can do is integer I, where here you just tell it that I is also an integer. And then you click run, which also just works fine. So I prefer to just include it in the loop. You can do it whichever way you like. And then over here what we do is x is equal to x plus 1. So basically let's predict what our answer should be. So x is originally 1. So for when it's running for the 0th time, x becomes 2. When it runs for the first time, x becomes 3. Second time, x becomes 4. Third time, x becomes 5. And then the fifth time, sorry, x becomes 6. And then after that, when I is equal to 5, it won't run again because I is not less than 5. Then we come outside our for loop and then we just printf. The final x value is %i comma 6. So when we run it, our answer should be 6. Well, let's see what it says. And yep, it says our final x value is 6. Another important loop we'll be discussing in this video is the while loop. So the while loop is a loop that continues to carry out the loop body until a certain condition is met. So for how it's done. So over here we define an integer, which is the initial value, and then we put in the while, which is the keyword, and then the condition, we have the loop body, and then the opening and closing braces, of course. So over here, what, like for example, whatever you want to do, it'll do all this, all this, all this, and then it's important to have this. So let's just say your x is equal to 5, right? Less than 5. So x is equal to 0 first. So then, well, it's at the end of the loop, it'll say now x is equal to 1. It'll do this again. X is equal to 2. And then when x hits 4, it'll try to do this again. It'll do it. And then when x hits 5, it'll try to do this, but x is not less than 5. So it won't do this loop and then go on to the next. So let's look at it through an example. Now let's check to see if it works. Yep, it does work. Okay, so what happens over here is, of course, we do this. This is our main function. You should be pretty used to this by now. Then we have the integer x is equal to 0. We define our initial value, and then we put everything in a while loop. So while x is less than 5, we want to print the x value. Over here, we do %i, which serves a placeholder, and this \n just tells it to go down one line. And then inside the %i, we fill in x, which since it's an integer, we do %i. And then we add 1 to the x value. This doesn't have to be x plus 1, it could be whatever you wish. And then return 0. So what should happen technically is it should print 0, go to 1, print 2, print 3, print 4. And then when x goes to 5, x is not less than 5. 5 is not less than 5. So it should not happen the while loop, and it should just return 0. So let's see what happens when you run it. So yep, we can see over here, we do 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so now that we have learned the while loop, we also must learn the do while loop. Do while loops are just another way of writing a while loop, but are very, very important. They're used to run the while loop, but they run the body first before checking the condition. So for example, if you want to ask the user based on the response to do something, then ask them repeatedly, then you can use do while loops to help you. You'll only have to write the command for the input once in the beginning. So this is how it's done. So what you do is you click the do, you put in your loop body, and then you put in the condition while statement over here. So let's actually see this in action. So let's see if it works. Okay, so over here we see there's an error. What does the error say? It expected a semicolon before X in line 8. So let's check it out. And sure enough, we don't have a semicolon here, so add that. Okay. Turn off that, and then okay, yep. So over here, what we do is our basics for what we do for every program. We define x as 1, and then we define another variable which is y underscore n. And then we go into our do while loop. So first we do, and then we print out our number, what we have right now. Then we print out, but then we do this, x is equal to x times 2. Then we print, do you want more numbers? Y is equal to 1, n is equal to 0. And then we scan for what the user says. Since we're taking ones and zeros based on the user's input, what we also have to do is %i, and over here, this one also has to be an integer. And then now we go into our while loop. So what this function does is it does all of this first, and then it'll check if y under n is equal to 1. So if it is, then it'll do this again. If it's not, then it'll just exit, but it'll still have done all this at least one time. So let's run this. Okay, so if we do 1, we have number 2. We should do it again. 4, 8, 16, 32, 64. You keep going with a do while loop and while loop. You keep going, 128, 256, and then once you want to stop, and that's it. So the pros of this over the other is that otherwise you would have to first ask the user, do you want a number? Say yes or no, and then based on that, you would have to go into a while loop, and then inside the while loop, you'll have to ask the person again, do you want it or not? And then you have to check it at the end of the loop. So if he says he wants it, and then you change the number, then it crosses out. So to fix that, use a do while loop to perform all the loop body once. Over here, we do x is equal to x times 2. So the first time you run it, x is already 2. But the thing is, we print it over here. And then after we ask him yes or no, if he says no, then we keep going. If he says yes, then we print out this x that we printed in the previous iteration. So this way, what happens is that our code stays clean, and then our user doesn't have much problems. Okay, everybody, thanks for tuning into the video and hope you have a great day. Make sure to like and subscribe, and see you next time.